I live in a big southern city where no matter what time of day you go out, there's always someone around. But I had a very interesting experience once. It was winter, and I went to visit a friend after work. We stayed chatting until midnight, and I had to work the next day. We said our goodbyes quickly. I got into my car, and without waiting long, I set off, not bothering to warm up the car much, as my husband was already worried sick at home, thinking I got lost. I left her yard onto the road, and I saw fog rolling in. I thought to myself, I'll make it home before it gets too thick. I've driven this road many times before, and it felt like my hands even knew the way home. I was driving lost in thought, and somehow missed the moment when the fog descended completely. I couldn't see anything around me, neither what was happening ahead, nor where the shoulder began. I drove cautiously, feeling my way, feeling a bit scared, fearing that some reckless driver might crash into me. So I continued slowly. After about 15 minutes, I started to worry that I hadn't seen a single car, neither coming towards me nor going in the same direction. But I remember that this street I was driving on usually had buses running until at least 1 a.m., but there was no one. I chalked it up to being the only one brave enough to drive in the fog at night. Another 5 minutes passed, and the fog seemed to ease off a bit, and I could see the road and the houses. But I realized I wasn't on the street I was supposed to be on, in the city center, but on a wide country road instead. It was wide, paved, but the houses along it were old and wooden. There were no streetlights, and it wasn't surprising since it was already night, but something about it still made me uneasy. I looked around, and there were no trees along the road, just emptiness. And behind the houses, there was just emptiness too. I thought I should slow down, check what street this is. I was already scared. Even though I was driving in my own car, nobody could harm me, I thought. I decided to call my husband, let him laugh at me and tell me that the monkey with the grenade got lost in the forest. But maybe he could tell me how I ended up here and which way was home. I reached for my phone, but it was turned off. I tried to turn it on, but it wouldn't, even though I distinctly remember it being fully charged. That's when I started to panic. I decided to turn back, since somehow I ended up here without turning. If I got here without turning, then I should be able to get back without turning. But as soon as I thought that, I saw a bus stop ahead, and there seemed to be a woman with a child on it. I pulled up to them. The woman was young, and the child was very small, maybe 2 or 3 years old. They were wearing old clothes, but they were clean. I started asking them how to get to the city, but she just kept saying, "My dear, you need to go straight. You'll get home soon. Don't even think about turning back, or they won't wait for you at home." I felt really bad. By the time I got back to my car and turned around, there was no bus stop, no woman, no child. I was incredibly scared, couldn't believe what was happening to me. I pressed on the gas as hard as I could and flew forward. My hands were shaking, I was crying. I didn't know what to do or where to go, but I kept driving forward. I saw the road turn right, and straight ahead. I couldn't tell if there was a road or not. It was unclear, like a wall of fog. In a panic, without thinking, I turned right, and there were familiar houses. Turns out, it wasn't far from home at all. When I got home, I was crying, and my husband was in a panic too. He started giving me tea and telling me there was a terrible accident on the road where I usually drive because of the fog. So many people died. There was a bus and cars involved. For a whole block, it was chaos. He was about to go there, thinking I was there too, as my phone wasn't answering, and I had left my friend's place already. Believe it or not, it's true, even though it's inexplicable. This story was told in 1992 by a mechanic who had moved to work in England. He rented accommodation in a village called Mart, which was located near the peat bogs that local farmers used to grow vegetables. The peat bogs were a sinister place, with fog hanging over them at night, and the mechanic, when driving through them to work, always sighed with relief, as getting stuck in such a place with a broken car was a deadly affair. There was an unwritten rule in the village to give rides to travelers, as many in the village worked in factories and getting home was far. One night, this mechanic was driving home from work through the peat bogs at 2 a.m. There was terrible fog, with visibility literally 100 yards ahead. Emerging from the fog, he noticed by the road a person dressed in a gray-blue work coverall, holding something resembling a welder's helmet and dragging something like a white-gray sheet. The mechanic decided it was worth giving him a ride and stopped the car. When the stranger approached the rear window, he reached for the door to let the stranger in, but the car's headlights suddenly dimmed and the engine almost stalled. Jumping outside with a flashlight, the mechanic looked around the car, but the strange person had disappeared. Then he thought that the person had fallen into a ditch in the fog, but after searching for several minutes, he found no one. My hair stood on end, and shivers ran down my spine from fear, he later wrote. Getting back into the car, he decided to leave as quickly as possible. Several days passed, and he never told anyone about his adventure, deciding that he had overworked himself and had hallucinations. But one day he was driving home again and saw that the area in the middle of the peat bogs was fenced off and guarded by the police. He got out of the car to see what had happened. The police told him that a farmer had found an old German bomber, a Heinkel 111, crashed with a crew on board. The crew members wore remnants of gray-blue coveralls and flight helmets resembling welders' helmets, and one of them had a torn gray-white parachute. Perhaps he wanted to go home? The Amityville, a quiet town in the state of New York, which in the early 1970s suddenly became the site of one of the most infamous family massacres in United States history. The crime in Amityville became the mystery of the century. Surrounded by mystique and horror, the house where the terrifying and inexplicable murders took place remains to this day an object of unhealthy fascination for paranormal researchers. The crime and mystery of the Amityville Horror. On November 13, 1974, a tragedy occurred in a house located at 112 Ocean Avenue, which shook the United States. Ronald DeFeo, Jr., shot and killed his parents and 4 younger siblings. When he was arrested, he claimed that supernatural voices of certain entities dwelling in the house commanded him to commit the monstrous murders of his family members. This horrific crime became the starting point for the next mysterious episode in the history of the Amityville house. A year after the notorious crime, the Lutz family moved into the ill-fated house with their children, buying it for a small sum of money and hoping to start a new life there. But soon they encountered unimaginable and terrifying phenomena. The house was filled with strange sounds, drafts of cold air, ghosts, and eerie visions. The family claimed that the house was cursed and that their souls were under attack by sinister forces. Invited psychics Ed and Lorraine Warren, after conducting several seances, added even more uncertainty to this mystical case. Subsequently, a horror movie based on the events of that night and the testimonies of the Lutz and Warren families was made. The crime and subsequent events in the Amityville house attracted public attention and other researchers of paranormal phenomena. Many tried to unravel the mystery, but no explanation could solve this puzzle. Skeptics, however, saw no mysteries here and considered the incident to be merely the result of a violent crime committed by the drug-addled DeFeo. The mystery remains forever. Decades have passed since Ronald committed the murders of his family members by shooting them in their beds, but the mystery of the house continues to live in the minds of those seeking a demonic supernatural trail in such crimes. Numerous films, books, and TV shows have been dedicated to the Amityville Horror. Yet this story remains shrouded in a cloud of mystery and fear. The Amityville crime is one of the most mysterious and frightening stories in the criminal chronicles of the United States. Its influence on culture and media continues to spread, but the real truth about what actually happened in that house remains hidden behind a veil of mystery and mystique. As for Ronald DeFeo, who served a 150-year sentence in prison, 6 sentences of 25 years each for each murdered family member, he died on March 12, 2021, taking the truth with him to the grave, and during his lifetime constantly changing his testimonies, seeming to have long forgotten what really happened to him on that fateful night.